Godzilla Minus One is roaring into theaters, and this might be the first time I actually cared about any of the human characters. Post war Japan is at its lowest point when a new crisis emerges in the form of a giant monster, baptized in the horrific power of the atomic bomb. Now, this really is probably the first Godzilla movie where I actually felt concern and connection with the human characters. We watch Godzilla go through a few different growth spurts. The very first time we see him, he's quite small. Now, he's still large enough to trample buildings and people, but he's not the towering behemoth that we typically see. Then, thanks to some nuclear testing in the South Pacific, Godzilla grows to a monstrous size and acquires some wicked powers and abilities. There are so many films with this creature, and I know that everybody has their favorite iteration, from the early beginnings with people in rubber suits to the pure CGI extravaganzas of something like King of the Monsters. Regardless, though, of which movie or version is your favorite, chances are that the thing you most look forward to is what kind of destruction the spiky kaiju is going to bring on the citizens of the world. Now, I'm not going to compare Minus One to Shin Godzilla, but that's the Godzilla movie that I most recently watched, aside from this one. And while that creature is spectacular and the devastation that it causes is close to God tier, the narrative as a whole drags and it's painfully slow. In Minus One, the storytelling is way more intriguing and more efficiently told. We follow a kamikaze pilot dealing with regret and shame, and after the war, he unexpectedly and begrudgingly takes in a young woman and a baby. Now, as months go by, he gets a job helping to clear the ocean of sea mines, where he then builds a friendship with the three others on the boat that are working alongside him. There's a lot of camaraderie on display, and I like that the progression of their relationship doesn't just instantly go to bestie mode. There's growth that we see as the team gets to know each other and then trust one another. I was drawn into the main character of Shikishima. He's damaged and grieving, sometimes with a huge chip on his shoulder, but we witness a softening of his persona over time, moving him from abrasive to sympathetic. And then, because it's easy to become invested in him over the course of his transformation, that connection lends itself to a lot of concern when he's encountering danger. Now, some of the other characters are also captivating in their relationships, creating a sense of a tight knit family, regardless of relation. And it's also built up a good amount of dread and anxiety when the group charges headlong into danger to save their city. Now, for as engaging and endearing as the characters are, really, the main reason to watch a Godzilla movie is to see what the creature will do and how destructive it could be. So much of Godzilla is created through practical effects here. And in one portion of the monster in particular was just very unsettling to watch. The eyes of Gojira are lifelike and almost with a human quality to them. They didn't look like lizard eyes or really any other animal. There was a familiarity to them as the creature faces the camera and then charges towards us. There's also this ability or effect that happens with Godzilla that's instantly cool, but also insanely threatening. The movement of body parts, combined with immersive sound effects and visual stylings, created an almost cheerworthy moment that left our audience just laughing because of the awesomeness that was on display. It was spectacular all the way around, and it's exactly what the audience was looking for in the story. Now, at first, we just watch Godzilla stomp on some people and buildings, using any appendage to just utterly destroy anything around it. But then we see the blue charge begin to light up along its spikes, starting from the tail and then ending with this glowing blue mass in its mouth before unleashing a terrific bolt of pure power. The effects for this are spectacular, especially with the vividly bright blue color that's on display. But then the effect of the blast, it's also wildly impressive and freaky. It's similar to a nuclear blast where the concussive pressure that rages outward from the explosion is almost just as destructive as the beam itself. But then, as an added bonus, there's this vacuum effect created where the blast changes direction and wreaks havoc in the opposite direction. Now, I also appreciate the sound design in these moments. Yeah, we get to hear this guttural roar from the lizard, but then there's deafening silence as the explosion takes place, followed by thunderous crashes and then jet engine like rushes of air. And this isn't the only time that silence is used to convey intense emotion or destruction. The film plays with that a couple of times to enhance the sequences and then make them more impactful. Now, for as much as I adored this movie, it's not perfect. There is some slowness where the pace and storytelling get a little bogged down in the middle. There's a noticeable decay to the momentum, which almost had me checking my watch. But thankfully, this lull, it doesn't last too long, and the story re-engages with an efficient pace. And while I am saying that there is a lull, I was also surprised to find out that this is 2 hours and 5 minutes long. I mean, I thought it was under 2 hours. So despite a little slowness, the rest of the film is so gripping that it just flew right by. Another element that keeps this from being perfect is that there are a few obvious and maybe cheap story moments towards the very end. Well, one isn't cheap, it's just very predictable, but the other, it's both. Now, it almost ruined a bit of the emotion of the story, even though it's an outcome I'm not opposed to at all. I think that within this sci fi story, the narrative does something even more ridiculous to fabricate an event that is more emotionally pleasing than realistic within its world. Now, mostly the story is very well balanced between human investment and monster destruction, with an urgency created thanks to Godzilla advancing toward a highly populated city. Now, this builds excitement and earned distress. We've already been shown how much chaos Gojira can cause, and when it's on the warpath and then returning to destroy even more, that ticking clock of its arrival and the humans' plan to fight, they're in conflict, instilling thrilling anxiety. This was an excellent time in the theater. The effects and the visuals are immersive and engrossing, with textures and colors that make the creature feel part of the world rather than a counterfeit edition created by computers. And for as awesome as the monster effects are, the human element of the narrative built tangible and charming relationships with characters that are flawed, nuanced, and relatable to a certain degree. Their interactions build moments of concern, changing the dynamic of the story from one that's entertaining simply from destruction to one that's deeply provocative due to character complexities. And this is one of the better Godzilla films, and while it may not contain the level of violence that some of the other modern films have, what we're given is spectacular and riveting thanks to the characters. There's no sex or nudity, some profanity, and a ton of violence. I give Godzilla Minus One 4.5 out of 5 couches. So, do you have a favorite kaiju film? I'd love to hear which one holds your top spot in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.